Welcome. How are you today?
Very good. Very good.
Good. Albeit some technological problems, we are here.
Yep. Story of
I'm
our lives.
yeah, exactly.
2024.
I'm very honored to have you here. Thank you so much for making the time. I know you're very busy, so I appreciate it very much. Why don't you tell us? Everyone's already heard my little introduction to you. So, today on the podcast, I'm very honored to announce that we have Doug Flynn, President and CEO of Flynn Group of Companies. Doug was my, well, not direct boss, but the CEO of the company I worked for about 8 years. And in that time, I learned so much, and I could not have asked for a better mentor in all things business. Doug has been an amazing mentor to me, not only while I worked for his company, but after and setting up my own business. He has always been there to ask questions, and now he's honored me by agreeing to be on the podcast. So I'm very excited to have him here. When I worked for his company, I learned, honestly, pretty much everything I now know about construction, from managing multi-million dollar jobs to how to communicate properly with a client, forecasting, project management, budgeting, all of the things that I now feel are like a second skin. I learned working under Doug at Flynn. So, Doug is the president and CEO of the Flynn Group of Companies, the North American industry leader related to the total building envelope. The company provides contracting services in the institutional, commercial, and industrial construction marketplace. Doug began his career with Flynn Canada in 1982, working in the field in Western Canada. He advanced through the organization, taking on roles in estimating, project management, and various other positions at the Saskatoon, Saskatchewan branch office. In 1991, Doug became the president and CEO when he and his family moved to Winnipeg, Manitoba, which was the head office at the time, to assume his new duties. Through a combination of acquisition and organic growth, the company responded to expansion opportunities throughout Western Canada from 1991 to 1997. A significant acquisition and other business opportunities brought Doug and his family to Ontario in 1997, where Flynn's corporate headquarters opened in 2005. Under Doug's leadership, further expansion has taken place in Canada ever since, resulting in Flynn having a fully integrated office serving every province of Canada. In 2013, a strategic decision was made to expand to the United States to respond to the opportunities that Flynn Group of Companies is uniquely positioned to participate in. Flynn has successfully completed several strategic acquisitions in the US, recently surpassing 2,000 employees. Flynn continues to assess further opportunities. Doug has overseen the growth of the company and has witnessed its expansion from a regional roofing company in Western Canada with less than 100 employees to a total building envelope trade contractor with an excess of 6,000 employees in 35 offices across North America. That is a feat. So I met Doug when he moved to Ontario in 1997. And from there, I watched him personally expand this company. And I even worked for the company while it was in that massive expansion. And it was honestly amazing to see. Every week, it felt like there was a new branch somewhere in North America. So he's a very inspirational human, but he's also extremely down to earth and just a lovely man all around. So I'm very honored to have him here today. Welcome, Doug. So why don't you tell us a little bit about where you're at right now, and we can jump in from there.
Sure. Thanks for the flattering introduction. It's not, I think most of the time we spend our time looking forward and we don't look back as much. But as a bit of an extension of that introduction, you may not be aware, but a couple of weeks ago, July 1st, after our long succession planning process for our executive suite, I've actually stepped down as CEO. And so has my longtime partner and our COO. We're both the same age. So I'm not leaving the business. I'm not selling it. We're really just making way for the next generation of leaders. So I'll remain on the board and involved, but at the strategic level. So I'll be an advisor, senior advisor for some time. But I think about, I put myself in your position of who your audience reaches. And I'm thinking about, I'd like to just share a little thought about succession planning. I've had a lot of people congratulate, which I find awkward. I guess what else do you say? But it's a salutation. But when somebody says congratulations, I think about it. Well, wait a minute. It's not really about me. I don't think of this succession plan as about me. It's about readiness from a whole bunch of different points of view. My successor, Dan Sims, is ready. Our SVPs in our various regions are ready. They're all half a generation younger than me. The company's ready. We're in good shape. The economy's cooperating. So things are set up for continued success. And that's what makes the timing right. We probably wouldn't do this during a pandemic or a deep recession or if the company wasn't doing well, but it's the right time for this. I'm 59 years old. I'm still not 60. It's close. It's coming up. But we've grown through acquisition over the many years. We've probably made about 60 or so acquisitions, some small, some larger, in North America over the last 25 or 30 years. But I've probably talked to 20 times that many where we didn't make a deal. And inevitably, I see someone older than me across the table, often deep into their 60s and sometimes even more, where they realize now that they have to do succession. But succession planning doesn't work like that. It's not a checklist kind of a thing. It's a planned event over a long period of time. And this is just the right time for us. So I encourage all your listeners, even if they're building, even if you're in the building stage of your business, it's never too early to think about succession planning. In fact, that's when you should be thinking about it. Eventually, we all retire and we need to step aside, and it should be for the right reasons. And when I see these people who are much older than me over the years, I see countless times I see people who left it too long. They were either too, I don't know, greedy sometimes or controlling, or sometimes just too busy to deal with succession properly. And every time I see that, I see how it has negatively impacted the organization. So I encourage everybody to think about it. It will happen. It's an inevitability. And that's where we're at for me. And plus, I owe my wife some time. I've been on the road for about 35 years. I owe her time. She's been so supportive of my career. And I'm looking forward to the next chapter. That's for sure.
That's amazing.
But
And
succession planning is a big part of good leadership. That's for sure.
yes. And I'll say for everyone listening, you actually helped me in my business with succession planning. You met with my dad and I about probably 7-8 years ago now, and gave me that exact same spiel. You were like, you got to do it early. You've got to do it this way. And I'll tell you, it's a struggle. Like, we went through multiple different versions of what that would look like. We spent a lot of money having valuations done and hiring people that maybe they weren't the right fit. And it takes years to get it right. And we're finally in a place now where we have a path and we're really executing on it and it's working well. But it took a long time to get there. And we're a very small company. So on a company at the scale that yours is at, I can only imagine it would take probably decades to get that into place and ensure that it's everybody who's coming up behind you is ready for that responsibility and is able to carry forward what you've put into place over the years. So absolutely, I think it's never too early to start planning for that and to start thinking about how your company can continue on without you eventually, because that's really the goal.
We've had a bit of a joke or a comical thing where we say at a certain point, there's a time to step aside, old man or old girl, whatever the case might be. And it's kind of funny until you're the old man. Then it's not quite as funny.
Yeah, no, it's true. Dad's been desperate to retire for years, but now he's actually pretty much retired. He's in 1 day a week, and he's like, I don't know if I like this. And I'm like, oh my God, like we're not doing this again. All right.
Sure
Well, yeah, let's jump in. So this podcast recording really jumped out after a conversation you and I had at a company event regarding entrepreneurial DNA. And I just thought it was so interesting. And you've been such an inspiration to me in my career and how much I've learned over the years. And I really wanted to share your knowledge and your thoughts and opinions on this type of thing with everybody listening, because I just think it's so invaluable. We discussed what entrepreneurial DNA is, and your answer was true entrepreneurs are rare. My estimate is that 1 in 100 is a true entrepreneur, maybe even 1 in 200. Many people think that they are entrepreneurs, but being an entrepreneur is about how you act. I have thought about this question: what is entrepreneurial DNA? And I offer the following as some traits that I have observed to answer this question. So I'm just going to quickly list what you had identified as the traits, and then we'll jump into some questions around that. So
Sure.
The first was long-term thinking. The second was that you're always building something, and this something is bigger than yourself. The third is that you are not materialistic. The fourth is that you don't measure success by profit, and profit is an outcome of all the things that lead to success. Fifth was that you are a can-do person, but realistic at the same time. Six was that you have the ability to build lasting relationships. 7, you're a servant leader. 8, you're accessible and you answer the goddamn phone. 9, you possess personal and positional power. Titles don't matter. 10, you're inspirational and you mobilize others to the cause. 11, you're a steward more than a consumer. 12, you lead by example and would never ask your people to do anything you wouldn't do yourself. And 13, you embrace change and are constantly reinventing yourself based on changing, evolving conditions that you have to deal with. So we're not going to talk about all of those, but we have a few that we want to focus on. So
Sure.
the first one is that you're
Can I jump in and just add one?
Absolutely. Yes.
When I wrote that, it was an email that came from sort of a stream of consciousness. I didn't write that over days or weeks. It really just flowed. But there's one really important one that I didn't add. And in preparing for this, I thought, geez, I missed one of the more important ones. And it's an appetite for risk. A true entrepreneur has an appetite for risk because, well, that's where the reward is too. I mean, just from an investments point of view, if you want a good reward, you have to invest in riskier things. So appetite for risk is a big part of just the DNA of an entrepreneur. And I also think that the successful ones are good operators that ensure that the risk is recognized and wrapped in good risk mitigation strategies. And I would say when I think back over the course of 40 years that I've been in the workforce, most of the time in an entrepreneurial manner, that's one of the things that gets me out of bed in the morning is the prospect of risk. And I recognize that not everybody has that. For example, my wife, 38 years of successful marriage, at least successful in my view. I wonder what she was saying. But she is the complete opposite. She doesn't care for risk. And so her and I are totally opposite on that, although that's why I think we work. But I do think that it's a big piece of the DNA, and it's something that I think you're born with, is an appetite for risk.
Yeah. And I think that's a reason a lot of people would rather have a 9 to 5 job, because that is complete risk mitigation, right? The only risk you really have is that you're going to be let go. But other than that, your salary is a guarantee, your benefits are a guarantee, you pretty much are good to go. So absolutely, I think that is one of the main things that an entrepreneur has to have, is a little bit of excitement, a little bit of an adrenaline junkie in a sense. And I agree with you. Like, I love waking up in the morning and being like, how do we do the next thing? Like, let's go. But yeah, for sure. Okay. So jumping into, you are always building something. And is this something bigger than yourself? So my question would be, what do you consider these things bigger than yourself to be? And a lot of people in this kind of entrepreneurial mentorship business space call this your why. So are there goals or visions that make for a better entrepreneur than others? Like if somebody's why is, ending global hunger versus my family, like, do those compare? And how do you personally organize these for yourself? And this is maybe a little bit of a spiritual question, but how do you go about that? What's your why? And do you put it on things like a vision board or a goal list? Like, explain that to us a little bit.
Well, I think everybody's style might be a little different, and that's fine. Whatever works. When I think about, for me, sometimes you're just so busy building something, you have to stop and think about the why once in a while, because in a growth atmosphere, you're busy. So there's a couple things that kind of come to mind. And I think my why is building things. And it could be, physical things. We're a construction company, so we actually build things. That interests me. I love walking a job site and seeing production and what we're doing and quality and safety, and seeing people that are inspired and motivated to participate, be part of the team. And then we build people and we build relationships with our people and with customers. So in that, you have to have a vision. A vision for the company does come from leadership, comes from senior leadership. They're the ones that set the vision. Where are we going here? But, it depends how big the organization is. But in our case, you can be much smaller than what Flynn is now. And of course, we weren't always big. I mean, when I took over from my dad, we were about 100 employees, in 1991. We've gone through all kinds of iterations since then. But, even 100 people, if you have a vision, you have to articulate it as a leader. So you set the vision, but it takes everybody pulling in the same direction if you want to achieve that vision. I read a book recently called Culture Rules. One of the best books I've read. It's written by a fellow named Mark Miller, if any of your listeners want to pick it up. It's really good. And the concept is that he was the VP of high performance at Chick-fil-A for like 35 years. And Chick-fil-A is known as a great culture. It's really written around culture. And, culture is not a goal. High performance is a goal, but culture is a great enabler for high performance. And they came up with, they interviewed thousands of leaders in various countries and came up with sort of what is universally true when it comes to culture setting. And there's 3 action steps that they took away from the data that companies like Flynn, or maybe some of your listeners could use. Again, vision, where are we going? That comes from the top. So that has to be articulated, and it should be written down in common language, way that people can, it shouldn't be a strategic plan on a dusty electronic shelf that you look at once a year. It's something you live every day. So you start with writing it down. And I did, we've had strategic plans, but you don't just have a plan. It's not a checklist type of thing. It's the type of thing where you do write it down so it can be shared, but then you have to live it every day. So the first thing is you have to have aspirations. That's the vision. And then once it's articulated throughout the organization, you have to amplify it. And you do that a little bit at a time, every day, every little conversation you might have with somebody, you're amplifying where we're going, reminding people, because we can all get stuck in details. Mm-hmm. And you need to do that. In my case, construction, it is detail oriented on the job, for example. But, every once in a while, you got to remind our people, here's where we're going. Here's how we're going to get there. So there's various ways you talk about it. You have meetings and you plan, everybody's in the bottom of the forest chopping wood. It's a leader's job to get everybody out of the forest or above the forest, to remind them where we're at in the journey.
Right.
And there's all kinds of ways to amplify it. And then the third, aspire, amplify. And the third thing is adapt. And what that means is you can make a plan. And the one thing you can be sure of is it's going to be wrong. You're going to have to change it a little bit and modify it, like making a budget in construction. And you know this, when you have an estimate for a project, the one thing you know about that estimate is it's wrong, because you're going to discover conditions that you didn't anticipate, and you're going to have to be nimble, and you're going to have to adapt to change. So, to me, it's about storytelling. Yes, we have a strategic plan. Yes, it's on a dusty electronic shelf, and we do share it and talk about it. But it's the little meetings, the coffee pot talks, careful listening as a leader, course correcting. And, it's hard to describe, and every organization probably requires a little bit of a different strategy. I'm a storyteller. That's my style. Someone else might have vision boards and that kind of stuff. I don't really have an art side of my brain. I'm a little bit more, a little bit less that way. But I do know where we're going, and a way to get it there. You have to figure out your own organization. It starts with having a vision. How you get there is a little bit different, and good leaders figure that out. In our case, we share it, and it's written down, and we remind people of it. We take pieces of it. Values are a part of a strategic plan and a strategy, and how you act as a leader goes a long way. It's the most you can do, because there's an old saying, our VP of HR is one of the wisest guys, one of the wisest guys I've ever met. And he had a saying many years ago when I met him, as a leader, what they see is what you'll get. So
Absolutely.
if you're approachable and you're working, you can't work part-time as a leader. You got to show the way. You got to lead by example, all those kinds of good things. And what your people see in you is what you'll get out of them.
And I have to jump in and say, when I was at Flynn, which was over the course, I worked there when I was in university for as a summer student. And then I also worked there for about 5 years in my career. But I really felt that being immersed in that culture, it was a consistent feeling of excitement in the office and understanding like what was coming next. I found it to be a very open culture where we knew what projects were coming down the pipeline. Everyone was able to kind of get on board, get excited about it. But then there was also a lot of investment in the employees, which I really thought was it just always felt like you were cared about. You weren't just a number. There was always events going on. There were really cool, like we had an amazing gym, and we had really fun events we did in the summer. But there was also investment into the employees. Like I remember going to a young leader summit, Flynn University, and doing that. Yep. And getting to share ideas. And it just always felt exciting. And it always felt like there was the next step and the next kind of opportunity for growth. And for me, that was really nice, because I'm someone who hates stagnancy. I hate standing still. So even as an employee, I always felt like I was learning. I always felt like I was appreciated. I always felt like I was able to kind of go to the next level. And I was still, even, not top level executive, but I was still involved. I still knew what was happening. So I think that's so much bigger than people give it credit for, is having that type of leadership and having that type of attitude kind of infiltrate your whole organization. And I think for you, like when you said building is your why, it just kind of occurred to me, like you started at 100 employees and now you have I think I read over 6,000 across North America. And it's like all of those lives and the families that, are involved with all of those people that work for you. Like that's such a very cool ripple effect that you've had. And I think, some people can say, oh, building a company, but it's like very interesting to see like how far that reach can go. And I think that's really special.
Two things come to mind on that note is culture is so critical, and it's just not, it's intangible, right? But every group of humans, it could be a company like Flynn, it could be a church group, it could be a government agency, it could be anything. They have a culture. And one of the concepts in the book that I mentioned, I've intuitively known this. I love when I read a book and it's like, I knew that, I just didn't call it that.
Yeah.
But one of the concepts in the book is that culture left to drift on its own almost never drifts to a great place. And when you see a company or a group of humans with a common goal that have a great culture, it's because leaders took it there. Good leaders led it there. In a growing organization, over Flynn's life, it's not just me. I have my role, but oh my gosh, it's leaders at every level. If you have a good culture, it's because good leaders led it there with things like training programs and next generation and some of the things you just mentioned. The other thing that when I think back on my journey at Flynn, we've always been compelled to grow, like we're willing to grow. And I see that's another piece of entrepreneurial DNA that wasn't on that list, that stream of consciousness list, but I don't know. It's a vast majority of people who are entrepreneurial, and they took their business to a level, and now they've passed the sort of running out of cash stage or the fragile stage. They've got some maturity, and I see there comes a point in time where okay, I've got some growth opportunity. I'm doing well. I'm making good money. My people are happy. I've got everything checked off, and we have this growth opportunity. And there comes a moment of truth, and you can either. There's a reason they call it growing pains, because there's pain in the short term of growth. The benefits come in the medium and long term. But inevitably, I see people make the choice. I can either grow and take the pain of that, or I can, I don't know, take Fridays off and coast a little bit. And I see that's predominant choice. And I don't really, I'm not saying that as a bad thing. I think you have to make the choice that is your road to happiness. And there does come a point where if I don't know, age kicks in or whatever, energy levels and all the rest of it. But at Flynn, we have never made that choice. We've always made the choice to inflict more pain on the organization by growing. And my favorite part of that is, especially, you just tweaked my memory on Flynn University for Next Generation. I think we've had a number of them. The class you were in had, I think, 60 or so people, sort of less than 30 at the time. And I intuitively know attrition happens. We're all going to retire. Well, you got to replace people. If you don't have people to replace the ones that are leaving, you actually will shrink. So, investing in young people is a great business strategy if you're intending to grow. And I could always see the excitement level in the people. If you invest in your people, they appreciate it. Mm-hmm. So culture and growth, a couple of pretty big, important things for sure.
Absolutely. So that's a great segue to our next question, which is on profit. So you said you don't measure success by profit. Profit is an outcome of all the things that lead to success. So my question for you was, are you really successful if you can't or don't make a profit? And if your vision is purely about the bigger picture, wouldn't a nonprofit be more appropriate? And where do we draw the line between love and work, hobby or job? How do we translate this into generosity and KPIs with your team?
Well,
sorry, that's really a lot of questions.
No, it is. But I have some thoughts that come to mind there. I should have said you don't only measure success only by profit. It certainly is a measuring tool. But like I said to you in that memo, profit is definitely an outcome of all the things. When I think back, I don't think I'm going to get out of bed today because we're going to make profit. Like I've never thought that way. Some do, and that's okay. I mean, you need profit, but I think about the process, and I think of profit as an outcome, like getting the people part right in your organization, mm-hmm. making sure your company's operating under a great culture. You just can't be successful without a great culture. You need everybody that is in the organization. You need them to want to be there, not just for a paycheck. That's death, slow death. And if you get that part right and have a solid strategy, obviously, and are nimble enough to change when things change, which they will, profit's a likely outcome. So it's a process. When you say getting the people part right, that's a must-have too. The rest really falls into place. I think about the book Good to Great, Jim Collins, probably one of my favorite business books of all time. It's been around a long time, timeless concepts. And the concept there is You have to get the right people on your team. So when you're recruiting, you recruit for values and attitude more than aptitude. If you get the aptitude, that's bonus. But if people are willing to learn, they can learn the technical aspects of a job. So get the right people on your team, then get them in the right seats on the bus. I think is Jim's analogy in the book. In other words, know what you're good at and stick to that. Like, for example, one of my weaknesses is patience. I've tried to work on it. It's way too late. Yeah, it's like too late to get any better than I am. But I know like drafting and engineering is a big part of what we do. And it's a meticulous, slow, painful, precision type of thing. And if you ever wanted to chase me away from Flynn, put me in a drafting cubicle. I would be ineffective. So you got to know that about yourself. When you get the right people on your team, put them on the right seats on the bus in the right roles. And probably my favorite part when I think back in the context of 40 years and just little decisions that lead to success. Every once in a while, when you have a team, you might find you have someone creeped onto that team that doesn't demonstrate the right values. They shouldn't be on the team. And the right thing to do there as a leader is get rid of them. Because if you keep them, your good people will leave. So get the right people on your team, get them in the right parts, roles, and always keep an eye open for rotten apples. If you can master that and build great teams, you'll probably be okay. In terms of profit, yes, you need to make profit. It's the ultimate score sheet. You know, I think our whys evolve over time. Like my wife and I are talking now about, perhaps some philanthropic things that my wife is more geared for that. She's just a gem of a human being. I cannot meet her moral bar. Never have been able to.
She
I
is
just
very
admire
lovely.
her. She's amazing. And I can see that, and she won't do it for personal credit or anything. But, we've had some success and we'd like to get into philanthropy, and we will quietly. But, you can't redistribute poverty.
Mm-hmm.
So as an entrepreneur, as you're building something, how much is enough? And your lifestyle speaks volumes and so forth. And I think about helping others and building others up. That's something that appeals to me and certainly my wife. So we're going to get into that. But if you don't make profit, you can't help anybody.
Exactly.
So profit is absolutely necessary. It is the ultimate. It's not the reason to get up in the morning, but boy, oh boy, you better keep an eye on it. Mm-hmm. And keep an eye on your cash too. A lot of business owners and leaders and entrepreneurs get profit confused with cash management. And, you can be profitable and insolvent at the same time. Especially construction, where we pay our bills long before we get paid. And you got to keep your eye on the till to make sure, because missing payroll would be a really bad event.
Yeah, that's the one thing you don't want to miss.
No.
My question for you, and because we have a lot of creative entrepreneurs that listen to this podcast, a lot of people that are solopreneurs that don't have a team, and a lot of people that have built a business basically on their creative joy, something that they maybe was a hobby at one point that has become a business. And I guess from your perspective, is there like a level that you need to reach where profitability, like if you don't hit a certain profitability, like when do you call it quits? Because I think a lot of people struggle with that as to like, I'm building this business, I'm barely scraping by, is there a point that you push yourself to before you call it quits?
Well, if you run out of cash, I guess you got to call it quits. This is now stream of consciousness. I haven't had a chance to really pre-think of. I think I missed that question in the briefing, but I'll say this. The old left brain, right brain. I've kind of noticed that and I'm sure this isn't universally true, but if you're blessed with the part of brain that is the creative side, let me say this. I've observed over my journey that I've never met the perfect person. Nobody is the whole package. There's two halves of the human condition. And the best you can do, the most you can aspire to, is to be half perfect or really great. You might have to be competent at the other half, but you'll never be great at it. So I would say figure out what half you're best at. That's self-awareness, EQ. And more importantly, figure out what half you're not great at. And surround yourself with people. If you're a solopreneur, get advisors or consultants that are great at the other half. And that will make you seem smarter than you actually are. And you can maybe answer those questions. Because if you're not profitable, you're doing something incorrectly. Mm-hmm. You're missing something. And you should reach out to people who are great at what you're not great at. I know what half I'm not good at. And it usually, if you're struggling finding out what you're great at, what you're not great at, think about what you like and think about what you don't like. And what you like is probably in line with what you're great at. And for me personally, I can think back to when we were much smaller. and to what we are up until 2 weeks ago when I'm stepping away from the day to day. I'm still involved with transition for probably the better part of a year, but and then I'll be involved strategically. But I have a sense of dread in that I'm not going to be doing some of the things that I like at Flynn, although I've got other parts in my life where I can scratch that itch. My sons are both in businesses and I can help them, but I'm really happy that I can ditch the things that I have come to not like.
Right.
And for example, at 6,000 people, a COO's role is a lot different than 100 people. At 100 people, you're on the front lines. You're making things happen. You're getting sales. You're doing estimates. You take care of customers. You take care of people. You're hiring people. And you're doing all the fun stuff. At 6,000 for the last 10 years or so, it's like every time we're making a big decision, you got to deal with a friggin' lawyer or something. And and lawyers are trained to tell you why not to do things, or at least to point out the risk. So I'm happy to be. So I know that's a long way around your question, but I think the way I would answer it is back to self-awareness. Figure out what you're good at. And most of us know what that is. And figure out what we're not good at. Like if you're not making money, maybe you need to charge more. Maybe you need to condition your customer for additional costs once you have a contract, those kinds of things. Some people don't like to ask their customers for the order or ask them for more money. But I'm sorry, like that's part of the deal. That's part of being a good business person. And if you're a solopreneur, you better be rounded. You have to be good at a little bit of everything. There's consultants out there that can help too, or podcasts like this, or resources that you can go to help you on the things you need help with. But it starts with admitting what you need help with. Hopefully that answers.
It does. I had the last episode I recorded, I'm not sure when it will launch in comparison to this one, but we were discussing hiring for your weakness and hiring again for what you don't like to do. And one of the things she said is she's like, I knew right off the bat, I didn't want to deal with the money side. She's like, so the first person I hired within 2 weeks of starting my business was an accountant who would ask for the money, be the person in between so that she could kind of maintain more of the nice customer focused side, and then have somebody who had a little bit more of the, laid down the hammer. So absolutely. I think that's so important. And like you said, nobody can be perfect at everything. So you have to be able to identify what it is you need help with and what you don't like to do, and strategically work to be able to fill those gaps.
Remember, a great accounting type person might not be able to walk into, let's say, a home or a place of business where they're going to redesign it and have a vision and see. Like for me, I don't have that. My wife has that. And so it's not a bad thing to admit what you're not good at. Just admit it and get on with it, and get someone around you that knows better, and you will seem smarter than you actually are. That I feel like that in my case. I've surrounded myself with smarter people on the things I'm not good at. And the outcome is from the outside, people think I'm smarter than I really am.
That's funny. Okay, moving on to servant leader. This was something in our discussions leading up to the podcast we were chatting about quite a bit, and I found it to be just a really interesting concept. So can you describe that to our listeners and give a few examples from personal experience of what it means to be a servant leader?
Sure. Even though I've kind of been at the top of the org chart for a while at Flynn, I've always felt like, and I think I've acted like, I work for everyone in the organization. Turn the pyramid upside down. And you can't fake that. You really can't. People will spot that every time. You have to authentically care about your people. All kinds of ways to do that. An example at Flynn is workplace health and safety. I can remember a time, I did start on the tools at a point in time where it was sort of safety schmafety, or we're only going to be safe when somebody's looking because we have a job to do.
The safety squint?
Yeah. It was true. That's the way it was. And it was almost a badge of honor to be unsafe. But I'm talking about decades ago. It's not that way now. But about 20 years ago, we decided that we were going to be the safest specialty contractor in Canada. And that meant change. That's the difficult part. You have to change old habits. The old saying, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. You can. The hard part is to get him to unlearn his old trick. That's the hard part. So we put together I think this sort of is laced with servant leadership. And you could put out a memo, I guess, and say, everybody's going to be safe now. Well, that would be ineffective. It starts with face-to-face, where people can hear you, the inflection in your voice, and feel it. And I made a promise at that time that I would attend every Flynn office for the rest of my career once a year and have a safety day. Everybody gets paid. It's a very big investment, and it's like a stand down. And we talk about it. We talk about safety and the why, remind ourselves of the why, and remind ourselves that, work is really important, but it's not as important as what's waiting for us at home. And let's make sure we have that in the proper perspective. And I remember saying that to various size offices, but it was the same message everywhere. It had to come from the top, was safety is a choice. It's actually a personal choice. So it's my choice when I walk a job to make sure I have the proper PPE and not taking risks and unnecessarily and that sort of thing. And I told everybody, it's your choice to be safe, and you're free to make that choice, even if it's to be unsafe. But if you choose to be unsafe, you're making a choice about working at Flynn. And there was a moment of truth where you could it happened every single time, where it's like, oh, okay, I guess this is real. This is not just a meeting that we'll ignore after everybody leaves town. And we meant it, and we put resources around it. And maturity, once we went through change, doesn't happen overnight. My part was to start it, and it was our branch leaders and right to the field leaders' job to make sure it got done. And but going out face to face and talking to people, to me, that's a sign of servant leadership. Other examples: answer your phone. I love that one. I had, in fact, about a month ago, there was a young guy, 20 something, just started at Flynn. I'm in early, and I was at the coffee pot making coffee, and he recognized me because I'm on the orientation video. I didn't know who he was, and he was a little nervous or whatever. And I stirring our coffee, and I said, "You just started here." He goes, "Yes, sir." I said, "I got one piece of advice for you that'll change your life." How old are you? He's 23 or something, right out of school. And he says, "What's that?" Looking for this beautiful advice, from on high. And I said, "Answer your phone." And I just walked away giggling. But it's true. Be accessible. That is a sign of servant leadership. Be visible. Be approachable. Listen first. Your people want to be heard. Even if you don't do what they say, they want to be heard. So the best entrepreneurs that I've seen are truly servant leaders. And the result is that they're leading organizations, and their people choose to follow them. They're not just there for a paycheck. So servant leadership, big piece of it.
Absolutely. I think for me, I almost feel like I get too emotionally involved with, like, not emotionally involved, but like I get too emotional about my people. Like, I'll start talking about my lead designer, who I just absolutely adore. Like, she's all the things. She checks all the boxes. She is everything I'm not. And like, I'll tear up when I talk about her because I'm like, I just love her so much. She's so great.
Yeah.
But to me, it's like, I want to give everything I can to make her better, to give her the type of environment where she feels appreciated, successful, free to do her genius. So I think it's definitely what you said about authenticity, though. I think that's key, because you can pretend to care and it's so see-through. So yes, I think that's something that people should aspire to be. And if you don't come by it naturally, find the place where you're passionate about being there for your people or your clientele or whatever it might be, and really try to cultivate that in a way where you can be authentic when you're doing that. I loved the point, answer your phone. So I want to talk a little bit about today's generation, because they're very different than I think the past generation. And my generation's interesting because, and you have children that are the exact same age as me, but we've kind of seen it all. We went, as children, we went from like not having computers, not having phones. Like, we grew up in like the get your bike out, be outside all day, come home when the lights come on type of mentality, which children don't have anymore, to, now we all have smartphones and we're starting to understand, we're of a generation that is pretty decent with technology, but we really kind of bridge that gap. But the generation coming in, I hope this isn't, insulting to that generation, but I find there's a lot about personal boundaries. There's a lot about, like, they all seem to put themselves at the very top of the list. There's not a lot of servant leadership qualities that I'm seeing. I was chatting with someone at a family event the other day, also young, and I was asking him, what are you doing with your career? And he's like, "Oh, I'm trying a few things. I got to see what feels right for me, and I got to see what makes me feel, And it was just like this strange way of thinking about business, and I was just like, okay, it's a little bit weird. So give me your opinion on that, and do you see any benefit to that type of mentality, and how is that working in bringing those people into the organization?
Well, take this from a 59-year-old man who's the last year of a baby boomer. So I have my perspective too, and everybody does. I mean, we're just a product of our environment, right? And that's fair. But I'm different than my dad. He was different than his dad. My kids are different than me, and we have 8 beautiful grandchildren. They're going to be different than their parents. So it's okay to be different. I listen carefully to millennials and Xers and Zs and all the rest of them. And I think they all have great ideas. All of them. Once in a while, I'll hear like a baby boomer talking about a millennial in negative terms. And my first thought is that baby boomer is a bit of a fossil. You're not willing to be open to the fact that they're a product of their environment. You can't blame people for that. We all learn by our what's around us, what we can feel, touch, and hear and see. And so I always make allowance for that. I think there's like 80%. I really like what I hear. 20% they need to be corrected because they're immature. It's not necessarily a millennial or a generational anything. Like be on time for God's sakes. Like this is a timeless advice, or unanswer your phone, things like that I think often are optional. I see that too much. But when it comes to being a business owner, I hear the one I hear about is work-life balance.
Mm-hmm.
Now it depends what your choice is. When I hear and personal boundaries and that, like when I think about when you're the top of the org chart, not solopreneur or small business or larger business, the buck stops with you. You don't have a job where you punch a clock. That's your choice. And I see people that do punch a clock, and often you can shut it off, and that's fine. If you're the top dog, I'm sorry, you need to be available 24/7. And that's just the way it is. It's the responsibility that comes along with the privilege of owning a business. Not that long ago, I had a young person, younger than me, a generation younger than me. They're embarking on, and they were asking, and they're buying into this business. And they said, "Do you have any advice?" I said, "Get your wife. Let's have a conversation. Better that she hears it from me than you." And he didn't know what I was talking about, but he did. And I sat down. And I said, "Look, I said, I want to talk to you about work-life balance, among a bunch of things, but one of them was work-life balance. And I could tell that the work-life balance was particularly of interest to the spouse. And I said, if you're going to buy this business and be a leader, you need to accept the fact that there is no work-life balance. It's all work, it's no life. And if you can't accept that, you should not be at the top of an org chart." Pause for effect. And then I said, now, wait a minute. I want to also say that if you don't make time for work-life balance, you've got something organized incorrectly. But the advice is when the buck stops with you, I'm sorry, that's part of the deal. It's part of your choice. And if you can't accept that or reject that, then you probably shouldn't be in that role. So that's my advice. It might sound like an old man, baby boomer, but I know what it takes to be a leader in a business and in a CEO position. And that's what it is. You need to be available. If you have to come home early from a vacation, that's what you picked. It's part of the deal. If you're organized correctly, it may never happen or rarely happen, but you need to be prepared that it's okay. And you need to prepare those around you that it's okay. I see a lot of leaders that are in demanding roles. You have to share that with your partner and make them part of it. Now, so there's sacrifice on their part, but for the love of God, balance that out. You should sacrifice too for them. So, and at the end of the day, if you have a good understanding, mutual loving relationship where everything's understood, it works out fine. But 24/7, man, that's it. Sorry, part of the deal. No getting
Yeah.
around it. There's nothing generational about it.
Yeah, I don't know if it's interesting to see everyone coming up, and it's interesting to see kind of what they can bring to the table too, because I'm sure they have opinions and practices that are going
Sure.
to be very different than how we've done things. So I think, as you said, there's benefits and drawbacks to both, and it's really just about those of us that are starting to become fossilized, understanding kind of what that looks like. But yeah, it's interesting to hear those opinions and see how it works. But it's learning process for sure as a leader.
Yes, leadership is a big load, and another little thing that I'm just thinking as we're talking along my journey. I remember somebody that I ran across in my time had it was a quick exchange, but it stuck with me. When you're the leader, remember people are watching. Your people watch you, and every little move you make is noticed. So you got to be there. It comes back to don't ask your people to do something you wouldn't do yourself. Get in the ditches with them and help move towards the vision.
Yeah, and that's really the next question is how do you start to make that shift away from being the doer and more the overseer while still maintaining that leading by example, that not, I don't want to say visual, but I think that's one of the hardest balances I find anyways being a leader is that I want to be in the trenches doing with them, but at the same time I know that I have higher level things that need my attention. But I often find that when you step away to address those higher level things, sometimes if you've been in the trenches for too long, it can seem like, oh, well, what are you doing now? Like you're not working anymore. doing something else. And, if I choose, for example, to work from home one day, I do worry about, are my employees looking at me thinking I'm just, doing nothing where I'm actually doing work? So what does that look like? And how do you maintain the ability that you're actually working when you have to step away and do higher level things?
Well, not an easy question because you're dealing with personal DNA, and oftentimes, not all the time, but sometimes, somebody who's a good startup person and maybe a solopreneur, but then they start to grow. Now you're entering into becomes a different organism, and what you have to master is letting go, and that's not easy. Now, in my story, I've been letting go. We've had such a high growth trajectory. I'm actually pretty okay with letting go because I had to. Can't do it all. And if you want to do it all and you get stuck and you're a perfectionist and you've got someone else to do it, but you won't get out of the way, then you won't grow. You're probably going to chase that person away. And so there's an art and a skill of letting go. I love it when I see people make mistakes. I don't love it when I see the same ones over and over. That's a clue that maybe that person should get off the bus. But when I see a mistake, it's, my only question is, what did you learn? And vast majority of the time, people don't make the same mistakes over and over. But you got to let them make mistakes. Even if you made that one before. It's like raising children, let them skin their knees a little bit. That's how they know. And that's how we learn as humans. But it's tough because, again, if you're a high achiever and a perfectionist, my kids are very different. I have 3 children, and my oldest son is a perfectionist. And he's a high achiever, and he's driven, and he will not let go. He's a dog with a bone. But so I can see in a high growth environment, he would have to work a lot harder than, say, my middle son, who is more like me. And that if somebody does it a little differently than you, that's okay. Did it work? Maybe there's a better way. I'm not stuck on my way.
Mm-hmm.
And that's probably a better leadership stuff. But you can learn that too. You can learn that. And it starts with thinking about it, being conscious about it, not sweating the small stuff. Somebody does something different, look at it and say, is that a better way? And learn from it.
Mm-hmm.
And that comes back to change, right? People don't like change. It's just a matter of how much you don't like it. But I'll tell you, change is the highest performers, best entrepreneurs that I've seen. There's a common trait among them. Very easy. When you think about it, make it a conscious thing to think about, it becomes very evident. They welcome change. And if there's a mindset of, well, is there a better way? And then actually change to do a better way, that if that excites you, you will probably rise up to be a leader. If you dread that and fight kicking and screaming, you will be stuck. Mm-hmm. And you won't grow. If your goal is growth, you won't achieve your goal. Now, some people are perfectionists and they don't want to grow. It's not their road to happiness and they want to be perfect. And that's okay. Then don't try to grow. Then try to be perfect. But you're going to have to do most of it yourself.
As a recovering perfectionist, I definitely, when starting my business, wanted to be very much in control. But what I learned over the years from having, I have quite a few interns that come in that are in college programs for design, and they come in and work with me. And I have found over the years that I actually learn almost more from them maybe than they learn from me. But it has resulted in the best changes in my business, having new and fresh opinions coming in and new and different 100%. Ways of doing things. Like I would say probably the top 5 things I love about my business were born from ideas that came from somebody else's brain. And I find my greatest strength is just creating a structure or a way for those to be formed and then letting them do what they need to do to kind of make the magic happen. So I think that that's what makes a good leader too, is just being able to, again, hire for those positions and hire people that have a different type of genius than you do, and allowing them to actually, flower and grow and share and be able to have the freedom to express their opinions and try new things and make mistakes. And again, they've also made big mistakes too. Like there's been big mistakes that I have to go, okay, maybe I should have been a little more on top of that, but I learned from those mistakes as well.
Yep.
And we drop down from the top new systems so that those mistakes don't happen again. But it's all a learning process. And I agree with you. I think if I wasn't learning and changing and trying new things all the time, I'd get so bored.
Yeah. Learning is beautiful. Again, though, you have to be careful about, you don't want to get complacent and have the same mistakes over and over is a clue of that's a big red flag.
Yes.
Of maybe something's not organized correctly, but you gotta let people make mistakes, let them learn from it. And generally they step up and don't make them again, and they're accountable. If you've got a good culture, you don't want people hiding them either.
No.
We have at Flynn, we introduced part of our safety culture of going beyond compliance was near miss reporting. And, I remember this a few years ago now, but I remember we don't get any near misses out of that branch office. And the next time I was there, I'd ask a few strategic questions, and I could tell that their mistakes are happening there, but they didn't want to report them because they thought they'd get in trouble.
Right.
So we had a little bit of a culture issue to fix up. Today, I think in the vast majority of places, if we have a near miss, oh my God, that's better than a miss. We can learn the lesson without all the tuition. So near misses and mistakes are wonderful.
Yes,
that's how we get it.
I agree. I think where I'm at today would never, ever have happened if I hadn't made all of the mistakes that I've made. And every single mistake results in a better solution, a better process, a better answer for a client, whatever the case might be. Every single time it's only a step higher to more, I guess, I don't want to say perfection, but more success.
Yeah, that's it.
All right. Well, I think this has just been so eye-opening, and you've been kind of our first guest from this large of an organization. So I think your perspective is really interesting. And I really like, though, how it's tied into a lot of the other perspectives that have been shared on the podcast. So I appreciate your time today. Is there any last words you want to leave with our listeners?
Yeah, one thing comes to mind. And I say this because my son just walked, my door's closed, and he walked in and looked, and he saw I was on a call and walked out. I just was thinking about family. Now I'm freshly, stepping away from the day to day, and I'm coming to grips with retirement. Like I said, it's not about me. I'll be okay. It's about the organization and the readiness. But I think about perspective, and I see a lot of business owners. It's a demanding choice to be a business owner or in a senior leadership position, and it is a choice. Nobody held a gun to your head to be where you're at. You made that choice. But I think perspective is important. We can get so wrapped up in what we do. It's demanding, it's busy, and we can sometimes lose perspective. So my punchline is, when I think about, when I leave this earth, and we're all going to have an epitaph, it's going to say something on it. And for me, it's not going to say business guy or CEO. It's not that important. What it's going to say is dad or grandpa. 8 grandkids, they all love me because I can have no rules with them. I'm not their dad. I don't have to have rules. And every time I spend a bit of time with these little characters now, I'm just reminded about the most important things in life. And honestly, you have to have a good job, and you have to take care of it, and you have to accept the responsibilities that go along with the privilege of owning a business. But don't forget about the other things in your life. I've seen that too, where we can get too wrapped up. Make the work-life balance happen. Got to make it happen.
Amazing. Well, thank you. Thank you for your advice and your time. We really appreciate it.
Okay. Thanks, Brittany, and good luck with the podcast going forward.
Thank you.